Welcome to the second edition of the Ottawa Black Film Festival, created by the Fabienne Kola Foundation, supported by Canadian Heritage, and available online from March 24th to the 27th. Be sure to get your all-access pass on ottawablackfilm.com. And thank you all so very much for joining us for this panel discussion titled Places We Call Our Own. My name is uNATy, and I have been the host and producer of Loud Her on CHUO 89.1 FM since 2020. I have a deep passion for volunteerism, and I am a contributor for the station, and I serve on the board of 2 local not-for-profit organizations. Before we get started today, folks, we want to start by acknowledging that even though we are virtual today, the land that we are gathering on is the traditional, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial. We are very grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. So we are going to be getting things started today, but we have an incredible group of panelists with us. Let us start off by welcoming César Ndéma-Moussa with us. He is the Eastern Ontario Regional Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity in Child Welfare and E.D.I, trainer to multiple institutions and senior leaders, a Pan-Africanist community leader addressing issues impacting Black peoples locally, nationally, and globally, just as and in line with Ottawa Black Film Festival, the former assistant director to the 2010 edition of the International Pan-Africanist Film Festival held yearly in Cannes, France. Shewit Kalaty is the board director and chair of the programs committee of Black Ottawa Connect and marketing and communications manager. Shewit is a storyteller, writer, and creative consultant. She turns narratives to normalize the authentic, positive, and dynamic experiences of women and people of color and helps shape powerful brand stories. Suzan Richards is the artistic director and founder of the Cultural Art Studio and a loving mother of Julianne and Samuel. She is an inspired performing artist, seasoned teacher, and choreographer. Known in the community and to me as Teacher Suzan, she has touched the lives of thousands of youth in Ottawa and the surrounding community through her studio and her work as a professional artist and arts educator with multicultural arts in schools and communities, otherwise known as MASC. Suzan is also being honored this year as 100 Most Accomplished Black Canadian Women for 2022. We applaud you. Each of you that are with us today, thank you so much for being here. You have supported and created safe spaces for the Black community, and we as the community are so grateful to each of you, and I am so grateful to having you here with us today. So to everybody watching right now, I'm going to ask you all to take a moment to just pause and think back to a time when you were able to be your 100% authentic self in a space. What did that look like? What did that feel like? I'm talking about no judgment, no filter, no insecurity. Was that a recent memory? Was it a distant memory? So this panel is called Places We Call Our Own, and it's an opportunity for us to engage in a discussion about the necessity for people of color, for us as Black people, to have safe spaces. We will also discuss how a safe environment for gathering positively contributes to the well-being of all members of the Black community, and also explore how we can meet the needs for these spaces. So, without further ado, let's get this conversation started. So thank you all again for being here. I hope you're all doing well. Yes, yes, yes?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion defines a space as being a safe space, as being a space where people can express honest impressions, thoughts, and attitudes without fear of ridicule. In hearing this definition, can one of you share the most recent experience you have had in a safe space by this definition in the community? Just tell us a bit about that experience and what it meant to you. Should we start off with Shewit?
I'm trying to think. I know that it's easy to ask specific, but I think that anytime you don't have to perform, I think Black people get policed in a way. We talk about policing in like, in the sort of violent sense, but there's also policing in sort of the workspace. There's policing in sort of social settings, and that requires performance because that's a means of survival. And so I think when somebody gives you a safe space to not perform, then it allows you to show up authentically, and then it allows you to do the work in the most honest and true way. So I actually just recently had a situation where I was working actually with my boss who is not Black, and he asked me very transparent questions, and I gave very transparent answers, and that kind of allowed for the expansion of a different dynamic. I think that they're trying to build, like he and I, and then just also as a whole. So I think even at Black Ottawa Connect, I mean, its expansion happened at sort of with the advent of George Floyd, but I think the precipice was like long, something that was like the community had been starving for a long time. And so social media is amazing because it allowed for that on this Facebook page, where there's like thousands of people sort of giving information and exchanging knowledge through care, and I think that that's a safe space too from a community standpoint. And then we have yet to be sort of go in person, but I mean the fact that it continues to be that way, I think is a great example.
Thank you for sharing that. César or Suzan, did you want to add to that?
Suzan, if you
Sure. I'm very fortunate that I've been able to create a safe space, a physical safe space, to be able to celebrate our culture loudly and proudly. That was what the catalyst of that was for when I myself was looking for a space to dance when I moved to Ottawa, for a safe space to be able to celebrate who I am and celebrate my music and art. And it didn't really exist. So sometimes when something doesn't exist, you have to create it, similar to what Shewit was saying about Ottawa Black Connect. It was the same thing. That's why the studio was created, for young girls and boys who look just like me, who are curvaceous, who are loud, who just want to shake, and they're not going to stand and dance within the European standards and just celebrate self. So sometimes we have to create that space. So I'm very fortunate that I get to show up as myself loudly and proudly every single day through my art, through my culture, and for others to also see me showing up as myself.
So would you say that that was the first time you had creating that space was the first time you actually felt this safety? Was it at that moment, or did you feel like you had kind of a taste of it before and it led you to saying, I want more of this?
Good question. I did have taste of it before because I danced in spaces of that was my training. I remember when I used to go to the regular dance schools and I was the only Black girl, and the teachers would put me in the middle, in the front, even though I may not have been the best dancer for that particular number. And I remember distinctively asking the teacher why, and she said it's because you balance out my room. I was about 8. That was my first encounter with being othered. And I told my parents, and of course they ripped me out of it, as good Caribbean parents do. They're like, no, you're not going to stay there. And I went into other dance programs. And then I found a dance school in Montreal that was owned by a Black woman who was just Dale King, fabulous, with her long braids and her long nails and her loud, proud self. And she inspired me. She inspired me because that was my first safe space where there were other teachers that looked like me. I was taught by Black dance instructors and who looked like me and moved like me and celebrated me. So when I moved to Ottawa to go to school, it's at Carleton University, and there was a lot of Black History Month programs. We would put together dances and things like that. But then when I graduated, I was looking to continue my dance career. And I had walked into a dance school that I will not name. And I asked about classes. And they gave me the up-down, as if I wasn't inquiring for myself, as though a full-figured Black woman could not come and inquire about dance classes. And that's when I felt othered again. And then I said, that's it. We'll start again. So sometimes those negative experiences are the catalyst for us to create spaces of our own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for you, César, what was your first encounter with that safe space?
First of all, Shewit, Suzan, beautiful testimonies. I'm gonna continue pretty much on what they were saying before addressing myself more in terms of, I have to be quite honest. I'm not exactly a champion of the notion of safe spaces. I champion instead what is called safer spaces. Because even in our Black families, in our Black communities, in terms of the intersectionality of so many identities, we have Black people who don't feel safe around other Black people. It's not as an accusation. It's a human reality in light of experiences, emotions, and simply identities, right? But as we live in Black bodies and Black minds that are too often shaped, when we say Black, by non-Blacks in the Western world, mainly by whites, but as well, those historical traumas of slavery and colonization. Where are we really safe to be Black when we are not even really safe in front of the mirror looking back at ourselves? When are we really safe for being Black when even in the depth of our thoughts, we are not truly safe as we are constantly bombarded by an anti-Black culture, an anti-Black society, and overall, truthfully, as Suzanne was saying, the negative experiences are what shapes us to rise up or to crumble. Black is celebrated overwhelmingly through negative stereotypes. So if you ask me, in all my truthfulness, not only intellectually, not only physically, but in terms of my soul and the spirituality of my ancestors, I personally feel safe everywhere I go because I walk with my ancestors. I walk with the history of my people. And when I say my people, I don't just mean my Sawa people of Cameroon and Congo, who I represent with my seashell earrings and traditional hat, but my ancestors, Black from the four corners of the world. Why? Because when I stand in a room, I'm always true in image, as you can see truthfully. Those who know what I look like, what I'm wearing, it sends a direct message that if you're Black, I am someone you can dare to be Black with. You don't need to wear a mask, Frantz Fanon, black skin, white mask. Doesn't need to wear a mask. You see my image, it sends you a direct message of safety in terms of your Blackness and all your identities. But at the same time, in the content of not only who I am, but especially what I say, what I write. That said, even I have to be careful because unfortunately, as I am a human, I can make mistakes and I can hurt unwillingly. So, what I would truly say to really answer in terms of me, myself, and I, as a Pan Africanist, and people can see some of my heroes behind me, but really, as a man, as a husband, and as a father, I have to be safe everywhere at any time, not so much for me, but for each and every other person. Because just as my heroes are behind me, I stand on the shoulders of giants with a daily reminder that I could be the next George Floyd. So this is how, for me, if you talk about safe spaces, I talk about creating safer spaces. That's what I can answer at this moment.
Thank you for that distinction. Can I ask, César, I don't know if this is too personal, but just as a youth, were you in groups that were largely Black community members, or was your group very diverse? Or, my experience was being the only Black girl in class. I don't know if you had that experience. What was your experience like? And because I think that that's fantastic that you have that confidence and power to say that you've had that experience of feeling safer in these spaces. Just curious to know what that experience was like to have that kind of capacity in a room like that.
I'm used to being the only Black person in the room. I'm used to being, even at this age, uh, as a professional in government, I'm used to being the only Black. But to me, it's not so much about being the only Black in terms of the physical appearance. Is to have that Black message, is to have that Black speech, is to dare to stand up, dare to speak up. I'm not saying that I'm used to it as bravado and some type of pride, but someone has to say it. And
Mm-hmm.
if nobody says it, because I mean, a white person can say it and they can be ostracized, absolutely. But when you're Black and you say it, you're made to feel even darker. And when I say darker, it's the racist connotation of dark being bad. Me, I make it that dark is beautiful. I make it that dark is rich. And as such, from uh, kindergarten, elementary school in France, as far as I remember, I was the only Black in the school. And the photos did not show me otherwise. It's coming to Canada, notably in high school, that I was with other Blacks. And if I can use one example that really years later still marks my mind, is how in high school we had, I don't remember whether it was grade, I will assume grade 10, maybe grade 11, you know, in that time, the 90s, this contest. I was not taking part into the mama's jokes, just to let you know, but other types of dissing contests, and I was more on the intellectual type. But I remember a Haitian friend, and I reminded this to him last year. He really gave me a lot to think as in my youthful pride, I was nominated by the teacher, uh, assistant teacher in the history class. So, because I performed so well and I helped everyone else. Yet, this Haitian friend, I don't think he will mind that I give his name, Daryl Joseph, younger brother of Patrick Joseph. I know in Ottawa many people know them. Daryl Joseph had asked me this question in front of everyone. He had told me, "You're so knowledgeable in history and you have such good memory. It's amazing." And I'm like, "Yeah, of course. Name me the country: France, Japan, Russia, USA, Canada, China, Germany. I know something about them, something that connects, something interesting." And Daryl said, "That's great, but tell us our history." And you know why I couldn't answer? It's not because I wasn't intelligent. It's not because I could not read. It's not because I couldn't research. My only answer at the time was, "But they don't teach us that. I don't know." And Daryl said, "What is the pride to you knowing the history of all the others if you can't tell us in front of other Black youth our history?" That for me hit my mind very much in the same logic as when I say Frantz Fanon, psychotherapy, black skin, white mask. I was wearing a white mask. I was having false pride. No Chinese, German, Russian, whatever cares that I know the history. They can applaud me, but they won't have me in the room other than to be present. I still know the history of many people. I often talk about how people like to talk about Netflix and chill. Me, I do Netflix and learn. I watch Netflix while being on Google. This is how watching Korean movies, historical Korean movies, one thing leading to another. I found myself at the Embassy of Korea regarding reunification between North and South Korea, and everybody in the room looking like, "What's a black guy doing here?" That's from Netflix and learn. But that means nothing if I cannot be here teaching, instructing our people from prehistoric times to Kemet, ancient Black Pharaonic Egypt, to African medieval kingdoms, but also African presence worldwide to coming today so that our Black youth but also our Black adults and our Black professionals don't get the spirit jammed with only a knowledge of slavery and colonization and a reality of systemic racism. So Daryl Joseph, as many others, really helped to shape my mind to understanding that the strength that I show today is a strength that's built from many experiences where I had to reflect, to introspect, and truthfully, as a shirt that I wear, the symbol of the god Kepri of ancient Egypt, of Kemet, I had to be reborn in my soul in order to be true to my people, especially true to myself.
Some self-reflection, self-work involved, and access. We talked a bit about access. I'd like to take a minute to take that angle here when we're talking about barriers and facilitators, when we're talking about safe or safer spaces for our community members. When it comes to Black Ottawa Connect, for example, how do you think it felt like it was kind of like an overnight success, and in reality it was not that. So what were some of the barriers in facilitators in being able to make it the successful and important and crucial space that it is for our community right now?
That's a good question. I sort of look at Black Ottawa Connect as it happened word of mouth, like like in the playground when you tell like another child about something that you read, maybe. So I sort of think it had a very organic growth. It's obviously started way before, like, again, sort of the advent of summer 2020. So it was a long build. It was over 5 years, but that sort of catapulted it. I think that the summer of 2020 gave people what they felt like was permission to sort of own their Blackness publicly and state their concerns in a way that maybe there was fearful. And I find that there's still sort of hesitancy to sort of put a badge on that. I work at here, I'm good. Like, I don't experience, there's a, like a low key, go socially. And I understand that. I know that comes from conditioning. And that comes from experiences. But I think that some of the barriers were just, how do you, in a community like Ottawa, where we're kind of siloed, where there's not like a main hub, how do you bring a group, a large group of Black people sort of together? And so that's why it was a bit of a slow burn. And then, it kind of just exploded, and now it's more cemented. We're now incorporated. We have events coming up. We're asking the community what they want. I mean, ideally, one day we'd like to have a building and like have somebody just run the organization ourselves, and we're just the board, So I think that that's sort of the vision, right? Like, really community run, similar to what Suzan is doing. I think it's like, I'm inspired by that. I think it's amazing. And I love that notion of dance too, because it's like, it teaches you to take up space. So like, dance is incredible. What a wonderful tool, right? So, I would say that was sort of the barrier. And then we all live online. So it was kind of, the subculture was able to be created because we live online. And then it's exclusively people that are Black. So, that you can kind of be more free. And similar to what César was saying is true. Like sometimes, you're not always safe in your own community, and that can be challenging. And those are things that we have to think about, and accessibility and, different identities, and like those are, we can get into sort of complex issues. So the work is never ending, maybe in that sense, but it's it's brick by brick. That's sort of I think how we're seeing it. And and I think that I don't know, I've lived in Ottawa a long time, so I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this in this capacity where it was this big, and it's nice, and the board is very diverse, and we're all in different industries. So I think that helps. But so I think that would be, to answer your question, sort of maybe the hurdles we have to face.
No, thank you so much. And that networking piece is so key. Could we have had a Black Ottawa Connect kind of experience 10 years ago? Probably not, right?
Yeah. And you don't know what you know. When we talk about, I'm part of the board, and some of us went to school together. And, you know, we went to Carleton and we think, oh, if we were just focused, maybe then we would have actually advocated for Black professors. Like, we just didn't have the knowledge and the vision and the tools that, you know, Gen Z has now. That's why they kind of, you know, millennials are giving them like what, and they're just running with it. So it's, you don't know what you know when you know, and then you know, and then, you know, you try to make it better for the people before you and for yourselves as well. So yeah, the networking piece is vital, and I think is amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that diversity too. I
Yeah.
think that that's something that we see. You spoke to the studio and how it really provides that opportunity for the participants of the Cultural Arts Studio and for folks that come and visit the space. There's a variety there. So, you know, Suzan, on that note of creating a safe space, not only for the dancers, you're creating safe spaces for older adults, you're creating safe spaces in so many different pockets. Help us to understand how you're able to do that and honor the needs of each of those folks in the Black community that is also so diverse. How do you work to honor everyone as much as you can?
Great question. I think the reality is that we have to understand is exactly what you just said. Even though we are one Black community, we are very diverse within the Black community. My experience as a you know, born in Montreal of Caribbean descent, Black woman is going to be very different from, you know, from someone else's experience. So in terms of how I embrace it all is really teaching. A lot of people think, oh, it's just dance. It's not just dance. I'm talking about culture. I'm talking about who you are. I'm talking about your roots. I'm talking about your why. I'm talking about why do we move this certain way? It doesn't only come because the drum is telling you to do so. There's a whole history behind that as to the dances that we do, the dances that we celebrated for celebrating the Yoruba women and the fertility dances that we did. There's a whole story behind that. There's a reason why we tie our head. There's a story behind that. You ask my students, why do we tie our head when we dance? They can tell you. So it's not just a fashion statement as to wrapping our head. It's not just a fashion statement as to why we honor Mother Earth the way we are. We're working on a project right now, actually, where we're talking about we're doing a dance theater production for May, and we're telling the story of Yemaya. Well, Yemaya is known all across Africa and the Caribbean. She has a different name. Some people call her Mami Wata. Some people call her Yamoja. But in terms of that spirit, that folklore story exists all across Africa and the Caribbean. So it's not just the dance. So in terms of how do we reach, how do we connect, is telling our stories through dance. But those stories are still being shared. We need to keep talking about our roots. We need to keep sharing our folklore stories. This is who we are. And when César was talking about, you know, he wears it on the outside, right? You know, César's coming, you know, César, I see you coming. I'm like, here you go, right? And I know that it's very important for you to celebrate that on the outside. You know, some celebrate it through the way they wear their hair. Some celebrate it with the way, like, there's just so many different ways because we're so diverse. We're such a beautiful people. So we need to allow space, right? Using that word, allow space from mind to heart to spirit and embrace who we are. For me, you know, it's all about, especially when we talk about ancestors and things like that, people get scared, they get worried. They're like, ooh, let's talk about ancestors. You know what? That's who we are. Let's celebrate who we are. You know? So, and I bring that up in that same vein of the stories that we tell. And when I talk about slavery and certain movements that were done, certain dances that are done to mimic our feet in chains. A lot of people don't know that. Oh, what a beautiful movement. Really? Do you know what it means? This movement, this dance that was done to mimic slaves being shackled. So when you understand where it comes from, you know where you're going. So we need to understand where we come from to be able to create space to know where we're going.
Just going to take a moment with that. Yes, absolutely. Whew.
Well, I
Thank
mean,
you for
it's a reality, right? We have to be able to talk about these things. We need to be able to talk about this with our children. You know, we come from spaces like when you were talking about Black Ottawa Connect, and could that have happened 10, 20 years ago? I'm not going to date myself, but I've been around for a long time. I've been around for a long time, and I've seen different iterations of Black Ottawa Connect happen. And you know, there's a whole generation that came before us of people from who migrated here, who immigrated here from Africa and the Caribbean, who were that Ottawa Black Connect, who was that one house where everybody went to, who knew where to get the yams, who knew where to get, right? You knew that you had to go to that Black Ottawa Connect. That's what it looked like back then. That's what it was back then.
I just want to add to that because I completely agree. I think that Black Ottawa Connect was able to happen because of all the seeds that were planted before. Yes. And to add to what Suzan was saying in terms of even, you know, we talk about knowledge in terms of, you know, knowledge, but knowledge in your bodies. You know, Black people carry a lot of knowledge in their bodies, hence why dance is so profound. It's incredible, like how something that was maybe happened in Ghana somehow fell over into Jamaica, and then it's still, that's literally the knowledge that's all they could carry. Right, was everything in their body. So art is like more than just art. It's a survival, and it's a way of carrying knowledge to pass over like hundreds of years. So I'm with you. All these are all things that have happened. Like the acorn was from a long time, right? You know?
And that's the thing, and art, and we need to be able to connect those dots. When I'm talking to students and I'm teaching a class and they're like, oh, well, you know, I'm from Congo and we do things this way. I'm like, really? And this other one's like, well, I'm from Jamaica, we do things this way. I'm like, really? Gee, let's look at the slave trade, and let's look who reached Jamaica. Let's look at some of the dances. Look at some of the similarities in terms of Kumina and the ancestral traditions that we did, and look at those dances, how they are linked between Jamaica and Congo. We're one people. We just reach different places at same times forcefully, but let's talk about that. But also, I really want to say, let's talk about our Indigenous roots in the Caribbean as well. We don't talk about this. We often hear about Indigenous just as being in a Canadian context. Let's talk about Indigenous also from my perspective of the Caribbean people as well. We have Indigenous roots as well that we need to honor, and we need to honor those stories, and we need to honor those rituals as well. And I know it's not the same, you know, if you're right from the continent, but if you're like me and you had to take a couple trains to get there, there's this other mix that comes into our spirituality that we need to continue to honor.
So, no, please. I just think that you make a good point. You're saying that we don't talk about this. The question is, why? Do we not feel like there's comfort to have those discussions? And if not, what do we need to create that comfort so those discussions can happen? Where could that safer space be for us to feel like we can dive into those topics and expand and make folks more aware and have a desire to learn more about that? You know, what does that look like? César, do you have any insight on that piece?
Sure, we come from Africa, but we have to celebrate our roots, our brothers and sisters in Jamaica, in Haiti, in Brazil, because guess what? There is someone who looks like us in all of those Black countries. In the diaspora, as in Africa, I've seen a Haitian man who look like me. I've seen an African-American man who look like me. When I say look like me, it's not that someone told me. I saw them on TV and I saw my face on them. Just as in 2018, when I took a young Haitian male in his mid-20s in a project, in a Pan-Africanist project to bring him back to the land of his ancestors. The work that we did in terms of DNA, if I may name, can I name the name of the website? I don't know if that's publicity, but it's a very known Black website for DNA, AfricanAncestry.com. From there, the result that we did, my Pan-Africanist assistant in Montreal connecting and looking really for the best match, he was in doubt. But coming to Africa, kissing the land, reconnecting with, was it 200 years, 500 years later? But when he saw the king of his tribe that the DNA result gave him, when he saw the similarity, like my father and my father, when he saw that him who is 6'10" and the king who was 6'7" or 6'8", looking like his father, we are all connected. We are our ancestors reborn. We are our brothers and our sisters keepers. We should never fool ourselves to be celebrated in non-Black spaces to the point that we forget.
Thank you for that, César. I mean, we've talked about a lot in this block. We've talked about generational trauma. We've talked about our ancestors. We've talked about, you know, a key theme that keeps coming back is, you know, access to information, knowledge, awareness, and, you know, how do we create this opportunity? We understand what our experiences are in terms of having a lack of safer spaces or creating those spaces. But when we're looking at the youth and what we want to see in the future, what are the things that we're hoping to see? And I love that you brought up, actually, Suzan, the experience of, you know, I too am in the same range and saw, you know, some things from my parents in terms of, you know, coming to Canada, having to find community, having to find ways to, you know, connect with the food that was familiar from Jamaica, you know, all that kind of networking that was happening, that, you know, the smaller scale of the Black Ottawa Connect, like we're saying, the OG Black Ottawa Connect. But when it comes to what we're hoping to see in the future, what is that looking like? What are we doing now, or what can we offer now to our youth to try and foster greater opportunities than what we have now to create these spaces so they don't have to have a comparable experience of trying to find this information? A lot's at our fingertips, but we still have to do our jobs to teach and educate and nurture and support. So what does that look like, and how can we do that in our spaces?
For me, we need to stop trying to replicate the wheel. We are all, many people are on the same journey of wanting to teach, want to educate, but it just seems that we have this very narrow, or sometimes have this very narrow version of what this journey looks like. To me, it's a multi-lane highway. Just because I'm doing one thing doesn't mean that somebody else can't do it. But let's
Can you repeat that again, please? Thank you, so they can hear you.
Say for the back. Say for the people at the back.
Hear you in the back.
I'm just saying, I am so, honestly, in my young age, I am tired of seeing, like we are a multi-lane highway. Not everybody is going to necessarily be able to do it the same way or reach the same people, but let's at least be on that highway together. Let's move in the same direction. And the other thing I want to add is that it's never too late to jump on the highway. Sometimes what happens is that people think, oh, you know, I'm too old or I'm too young. That was your question, right? In terms of how do we access it? In terms of you know, what César was sharing about Kemet and you know, I just started on that journey, and I'm, you know, on the other side of midnight, but you know, I just started on that journey of learning more about Egyptian goddesses and that's locally. This is a local organization that is, you know, making sure that there's education classes happening, and it just piqued my interest. And then I'm able to do the Netflix and learn and Google and, you know, research. But there's so much that we don't know because it's been taken away from us. There's so much. It's never too late to learn. So I think when you say young people, I think it's everybody. You know, I really do. I really feel that everybody, that there's space for increased knowledge, and let's work together.